Hello, my name is Cheyenne Luzynski. I'm a doctoral student at Eastern Michigan University in the Educational Leadership and Counseling Department. I am here tonight talking with you about exploring the relationships of race and gender among STEM transfer students. And STEM, just for clarification, means science, technology, engineering, and math, and you'll hear me refer to STEM quite a bit tonight. I'm also working with 3 other researchers on this program. Dr. Kyron Graves, who is a biology professor, Makita Turner, who is a graduate student working at University of Michigan, and also Dr. Zamani Gallagher, my advisor and lead researcher for this project. So an introduction to the problem, or the issue really, is that there's a severe effort to retain women and minorities in the STEM program, as there's a concern that these fields are predominantly occupied by white males. And the reality is that women are 60% more likely to earn a college degree than men. However, there still remains this discrepancy in the STEM programs. They are dropping out at a much higher rate than their male counterparts. And then students of color pursuing STEM majors and completing degrees are quite low compared to other populations such as Asian Americans and whites. So we're looking at some possible explanations for these gender gaps and the race gaps for these groups that seem to be outschooled by their white counterpart. And some issues have surfaced, whether it's a disciplinary atmosphere or that can often lead to low self-esteem, unwelcoming environments, and possibly discrimination, and that really feeds into this sense of lack of belonging. So hoping today to dissect these experiences of our STEM students and those on the fringes to ensure obviously some economic health and productivity for our future. Also, only 6% of employees in the STEM are represented by African Americans compared to their white counterparts of 72%. So the background to this study is women and racial ethnic groups are the fastest growing segment of our workforce. An urgent need to better facilitate their successes in STEM education and career paths, both to support our national priorities of producing and diversifying our U.S.-born STEM workforce, and especially replacing some of those elder baby boomer engineers and scientists that will soon and are retiring. So the STEM growth is expected to grow in the U.S. and for us to remain competitive, globally competitive. And that women and people of color are significantly underrepresented in STEM education and also one of our most growing populations entering into higher education. And there seems to be a low transfer rate by men and women of color that makes recruitment into STEM from community college populations very problematic. And so our research questions today are, is there a difference in perceived transfer adjustment based on gender? And also, is there a difference perceived in transfer adjustment for race ethnicity? And what are those factors that are contributing to developing one's own STEM identity? Because once you embody that STEM identity, you're most likely to persist, matriculate through your programs, and have a sense of high self-efficacy. And then finally, just looking at it and exploring these experiences and perceptions of the traditionally underserved and underrepresented students in the STEM fields. So there's quite some significance of this study, especially in an era of increased demand for these qualified STEM fields employees. There's a need to kind of reconceptualize what gender and race means within those roles to better serve that demand. And it's certainly critical to study these underrepresented populations who have transferred from community colleges to STEM programs to determine kind of what variables will better support them in their educational attainment. And unfortunately, there's little research about experiences of women of color STEM transfers, especially targeting factors of attrition and persistence. And there's been some studies, qualitative work looking at community college transfers of women of color to R1s, but for this particular instance, we're looking at their transfer experience to a comprehensive. So the literature. Community colleges have been a great source of social mobility and pathways to higher education for especially the underserved populations due to affordability, access, and kind of catering to a non-traditional student demands of education. And baccalaureate comprehensive universities, as well as 2 years, pride themselves on this exchange of teaching and learning for the undergraduate level. And certainly community colleges play a vital role in that, in preparing women and students of color for transitioning into four-year schools. And it has also been argued that community colleges are having some of the same graduation success rates as those traditional starting at a four-year institution institution. And students that successfully transfer from community colleges are likely to kind of aspire to graduate school, complete their program, and seek some further education. Studies of women of color and transfer students reveal some common experiences for those. I've mentioned a few already, but the sense of isolation, not belonging, discrimination, low self-confidence, and concerns of financial aid. So a lot of our questions were directed to tackle some of those. And Starobin and Lanin, 2008, ascertained that developing some meaningful mentoring relationships can also foster their persistence in programs. So the cultural underpinnings of this study, we certainly looked at social mobility, and social mobility is essentially the shift in social positioning and movement of individuals or groups over time, hopefully in a vertical direction. And then transfer shock is this phenomenon to describe a significant drop in GPA among community college transfers following enrollment. And typically, when you're dealing with a transition, you're in a new environment, you have different demands, and it certainly can take a toll on one's academic performance. And then finally, the stereotype threat, which is concern or anxiety around a stereotype that exists, may actually reduce one's performance of the group being negatively stereotyped. So certainly situational factors that increase stereotype threat can include the difficulty of a task, the belief that the task measures your ability, and the relevance of that negative stereotype to the task. And the fact that this stereotype exists impacts that performance and one's self-efficacy. So the methods for our study, it was a quantitative study. We surveyed 118 transfer students in the STEM fields. Narratives were also provided for those who are willing to give. The survey instrument was emailed to all transfer STEM students at this particular institution. We received a response rate of 12%. Descriptive statistics for our sample were quite an even split for gender, 59 males, 57 females, and whites. We split whites and non-whites. Whites were predominantly at 83, and non-whites were 29. And then the Mann-Whitney test was used for significance, and this is just a non-parametric statistical hypothesis testing, looking to assess whether one of the two samples of the independent groups tend to have larger values than the other, and to look for that significant difference. Here is a diagram outlining just kind of the differences of what I just shared with you. So we have female whites, 32% respondents, female non-whites was 17, our majority with male whites was 42, and then male non-whites was 9%. The average age was that range of 25 to 30, and there we also did a split of traditional and non-traditional, our traditional of 18 to 24, and then our non-traditional 25 to and higher, and that tended to be a balanced response as well. So a little bit more of our sample profile. 34% of our respondents became interested in STEM during their formative years of elementary or during high school. And they largely said they were influenced by a parent or a high school teacher. Overwhelmingly, respondents were from the College of Arts and Sciences, which represents representing our biological sciences, and our physical sciences, which accounts for chemistry, physics, and those physically applied sciences. 56% of our population, our sample, received Pell Grants, and a quarter of them were first generation. So some of our initial findings in regards to gender was, and as a result of the Mann-Whitney test, we used a 5-point Likert scale ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree. And so these particular questions, there surfaced some significant difference between groups. The question, my peers recognize me as someone knowledgeable in my major. Due to gender, I feel I have to work harder to be recognized in my STEM major. And keep in mind, these are differences between gender. So they responded significantly enough different that there was some kind of significance that surfaced. And then a narrative revealed some support for these findings. This one in particular, I never felt that my being female was looked at as reflecting on my ability, but I did notice when there were or weren't other females, at times when there was only one or two others, it felt like there was a competitive issue, like a sense that they saw me as infringing on their chick geek status or something. Now for race ethnicity. Findings that surfaced, and again, these are different responses based on whites and non-whites. I identify as being scientifically, technologically, and or mathematically inclined, significance of less than 0.05. And this really gets at developing that STEM identity and how they look at themselves in the field. And seeing other people like me within my major reinforces my desire to persist in this field. Again, significant difference of less or greater than 0.001, which means it's even stronger. And then I feel I have to work harder as a member of an underrepresented racial ethnic group in STEM. So again, looking at, I realize that I am different and have to maybe prove myself. And then also a difference, and I found it easy to adjust to EMU, which gets at that complete adjustment to from a community college to a four-year institution. And a few supportive narratives. It was a tough adjustment coming from previous institution and having a 4.0 to here and getting 3.3 GPA. At times it gets frustrating that I am not doing as well, makes me rethink my major from time to time, yet I refuse to give up before I can say that I gave my all. So showing some persistence and resilience there. Being part-time and not involved in the department, I feel that I generally didn't connect to peers as much as others. I also never got a sense of how I compare to others. I consistently get high marks on projects and tests, but I don't know how to rank my ability. This creates both a low self-image and overly high self-image, leaving me overall with a hesitance to speak with others about my interests. And this raises some concern about being able to connect with faculty and staff, as well as advisors and students in developing an academic community at the institution. So some conclusions. There was a statistical difference in transfer adjustment based on race and ethnicity. Findings revealed no significant difference in transfer adjustment based on gender, but some other issues may surface. And then this is certainly a work in progress project, but there are some areas to explore regarding the marginalized populations and their STEM identity. Faculty-staff relations, the campus and academic engagement, and how that kind of fosters their persistence. And the limitations, there were certainly limitations to this study. One being that the survey sample size was very small, and we would like to aim for at least a 20% response rate, and this one we only received a 12%. There was certainly some skewness in between groups of white and non-white, with that non-white group being so small. But again, that gets at the reality of that population within this field. And trying to target that historically underserved population impacts the generalizability of this study, and that it was only one institution, so this is very institutionalized data. And the time of the data was actually collected over the summer, which may have some impact if people weren't really in the academic school mode and may have been taking a summer off of their academics. So future research, this is the really exciting part because we're really at the beginning of looking at this survey data. And the third prong of this study is a qualitative piece, which we have interviewed currently 9 women and many women of color, majority of women of color for that 9 case study. And we're hoping to increase that up to 12 or so, but right now our future research in this project particularly is looking at a factor analysis to address variables between groups, and looking at forming subgroups of academic background, stereotype threat, self-efficacy, the STEM identity, and then how it relates on that transfer transition piece. Running a multiple aggression analysis by gender and race, and also I'd add in there by age, and utilizing age to determine some group differences as well. And then finally, describing the transfer patterns of these students can really have an impact on looking at the function of our community colleges and serving the four-year institution. Certainly looking at the specific ways in which these marginal STEM majors use community colleges to access more selective four-year schools and to broaden our understanding on their experiences along this pathway, and increasing resources to help design and stimulate STEM transfer to retain this really talented STEM pool and certainly a growing population entering into higher education. Thank you very much. Here are my resources, and I hope you enjoyed the presentation tonight.